Thanks for joining us inside the Dancer's Studio, where we bring listeners like you closer to the creative process. Inside the Dancer's Studio is a program of the National Center for Choreography in Akron, Ohio. This podcast was recorded as an ongoing documentation practice with NCCAkron visiting artists in 2024 and 2025. In this episode, NCCAkron's Executive Artistic Director, Christy Bolingbroke, enters the studio with Atlanta, Georgia-based George Staib, choreographer and artistic director of staibdance. Dance Teacher magazine has recognized Staib as one of the top 5 dance educators in the U.S., and he has been commissioned as a teacher and choreographer for over 25 institutions. He is currently on the dance faculty at Emory University.
I am curious, particularly because as someone who started working in the field before the end of the last century and then the longevity to today, what does 21st century dance practices mean to you?
The conversation we had a while ago about working under people, single-name choreographers who had a company, whether it's Paul Taylor, Jose Limon, all that stuff, which is my background. And I thought, this is fascinating. I worked with people who had access to the horse's mouth, so to speak. But I'd always been interested in what else, what's next. Is there a way to evolve a thing? And is there sort of cachet in reinventing oneself over and over and over? And I thought, yes. There is something valuable about that. I fear the mundane. I fear boring people. And although I personally don't get bored so easily, I'm curious about what's next. And so if I were to assess 21st century dance practices, it really does move away from a singular, autonomous creator, crafter. To me, the joy lies in collaboration, which is misaligned with the way I used to work or what I used to know. With Limon work, there's one way to do it, and the only way to do it is the way Anne Vachon would tell us to do it, and it was gospel. But there's something really magnificent in terms of the diversity of the types of dancers that I encounter, the diversity of the training that they are embarking upon, that I think can fuel almost anything choreographically. So it's saying yes to all of those things as opposed to carving something out that's a bit more rigid. Did that make sense? There's clarity in my head, but maybe
it totally makes sense. And I'll yes and or add to, because I know a big part of your practice, you work in higher ed, and NCCAkron's adjacency to higher ed here on the University of Akron campus, and getting to bring artists like yourself to teach is to show the students that there's more than the binary ballet or modern.
Completely.
So that's my kind of follow-up question is, in this idea of 21st century dance practices, and with all that you've seen as well as what you know the body can do, what does virtuosity look like on your terms?
You know, I wonder if it's something, as I'd thought about that, if it's something that you can actually see or something that you intuit. And because on one hand, so the inclination towards virtuosity to me suggests that I don't have to only be this one thing. I don't need to lead with this technique. I can keep something in my back pocket, hide it, shield it, and reveal it gradually. So there are, of course, people who kick their face and their bun and their ears. That's great. When they lead with that, and that's the thing that they are about, I find that's talent, but I don't know if it's virtuosic. I'm curious about the what else of the stuff that I don't see, that the person doesn't necessarily need to use the fancy stuff as their MO.
Yeah. Almost that restraint is virtuosic.
I think so, yeah. And if you are charging yourself with be messy, be all messy, completely messy, and then you can pull back, I think.
We were also talking, certainly enjoy geeking out on the business of dance.
Yeah.
And you were talking about the need for longer term planning and visioning. So in trying to navigate those sort of resources, what inspires you? Like, where do you start?
Some of the most recent work that staibdance has done is rooted in Middle Eastern culture, but I'm also interested in the way people interact with one another. I read a lot of philosophy, and one thing that sticks out in my mind is Plato saying one part of the world does not hate the other. They're only invested in self-protection. So that, in some ways, is fuel as well. I'm like, self-protection can look like a volatile act against somebody else, but are you protecting the self? Are you protecting an idea? So these kind of conundrums fuel a lot of the work that we do, because it could be firmly one thing or firmly another. Ultimately, you are? Okay. So it's that. The way people exchange time together is fascinating to me. I love a good duet. And I love the tension that exists between two bodies, whether they are lovers or enemies, because there's still some sort of connection there. And love and hate can sometimes look the same because it bring you to the same sort of physical response or something that looks similar. And I'm curious about that.
But then it's all the different elements. Talk about which tools you're using, because it's context.
It is,
and I've gotten to see some of your work live, and it is beautifully designed and very full. This is not a lights and tights, minimalist approach for anyone who hasn't gotten to see Staib dance. So I'm curious, what do you look for in a collaborator to help you fill in some of those edges?
I wonder if it's almost depositing too much responsibility on a collaborator, because at this point in my career, and I'll get to the question, I really love responding to something that someone else has.
You expect them to bring something.
Yeah, because there's a thing where a singular person can generate a lot of ideas and then demand others to respond. If I drop a seed to a collaborator and they start to run down an alley that I'd never considered, that's exciting to me, because I think, how can we merge these two things together? And I'm reminded of an interview that Trisha Brown did, and she had put a coffee mug and a pen and an apple on the desk. And she's like, see, these things don't go together. And then she took a moment. She's like, oh, maybe they do. And it's really fun to find ways that somebody is asserting their ideas to fold it into mine. So I think their openness, their own willingness to expand and break their own parameters or their own boundaries is something that draws me to a collaborator.
You're reminding me, and this may be stating the obvious for those on the inside, but if people are less familiar with concert dance, the reality that it's always so fresh in a blank page. And by that I mean, very different than maybe in a play where you get a script and a collaborator, has a pretty clear map as far as like who the characters are and what it is. But you're really making it up as you go.
That's so
in
true.
Dance. And so there is a certain openness that you need, that curiosity, and someone who isn't just looking to be told what to do.
Yeah. Christy, you're making me think of something I don't know that I've ever thought about before. Growing up, I was so enamored with TV and movies. Like Dallas, I would be JR. I would lock myself into this fantasy. Or when I'm wearing headphones, I'm walking around campus and I'm making my own movie. And it's so intoxicating. And I think, how is it possible to do that on a stage for people to funnel their attention in such a way that they feel as though they're inside of the thing as well, rather than distantly observing? And I think if a collaborator can help us get there, to create this world that you don't observe, but you inhabit as well, and kind of lose yourself in some weird fantasy for a while, that's provocative. And maybe it just answers that sort of like, oh, I'm king of the world, 8-year-old George sort of thing.
It's something that's really interesting. You brought up TV, and that can be very two-dimensional, and particularly with live performing arts in competition for audience attention, when they can stay home and stream something. This is an invitation that is more complete. Definitely. I got to see your work performed at Emory in Atlanta. Yeah. And I, was describing, because of the set design, it was just at the edge of where the audience sat. We were almost inside that world.
That's true. Yeah.
So when you're talking about the sort of wholeness of inhabiting that and looking for collaborators that will also go on that journey with you, without trying to say oh, we're creating an immersive, and I did that with air quotes because that can be very like
people
trendy.
Use that word for everything.
Yes.
I think restaurants are immersive now.
Okay, there we go. We're like,
oh,
because you didn't make it at home, it's immersive.
Yeah, exactly. My laundry room is immersive because I'm interacting with the dryer or something.
Right. But how would you describe your relationship to music? Because we definitely have a lot of our university dance students who maybe will sort of cater to a top 40, the latest Taylor Swift album, whatever may be coming. That's all they know.
Right.
And then as you continue to develop a voice, what choices have you made as far as how and when you engage a sound score?
I'm sure staunch choreographers who reject the notion that music can make or break a thing, but I'm going to go on a limb and say I think it can make or break a dance. And I look for this sort of relationship between the moving body and the sound. Sometimes if you're conscientious, you can be seduced by the sound. Sometimes you can oppose it. Sometimes you can have dialogue with it. And I think these are all such subtleties that I don't know that I could ever teach. You just kind of feel it and it works. That's the way to create a world or a fantasy or connect to a feeling that is evocative of a different time or nostalgia. I've seen many dances change dramatically simply by shifting the score. It's such an exciting exercise. I'm very lucky now because I used to have to sift through many, many different sounds, but with the company now, we have a composer who works with us who's a pretty exciting digital sound artist.
You said it's something that you don't know that you can teach. So how would you describe or talk about what do you look for in a dancer?
Oh, in a dancer. I think a dancer who's holding on to a secret when they're performing is really exciting. Also, a dancer who's really willing to kind of, can you say vomit on a pot? Like vomit the essence of who they are into the space and let it all go. Dancers who can push a button and be in a different state of mind or a different being without worrying about transitioning from point A to point B. There are movies that I'll sign up for that are 2 hours long where basically nothing happens and it's a slow evolution of a thing, and I'm always there for it. Sometimes it's a little bit challenging to encounter that, for me personally, in a dance space, because I don't know that I'm not sure really where to focus. So my personal preference is to keep throwing something new here and there to keep the senses alive. And if a dancer can do that and shapeshift a bit, not saying change who you are, but how you might deliver a thing, I'm intrigued. Tell me more. Yeah.
Well, there's something, hearing you talk about that reminds me, when I've been able to experience the entirety of one of your works, there's a lot of texture in it.
Okay, yeah.
Whereas I would say there, particularly in hierarchical forms like ballet, there's a certain predictability in the form of the evening that you're like, and here's the big group opening, and here we're going to do a solo, and here we're going to do a trio, and here we're in. While you definitely enjoy a good duet and lots of different tools and things, it is that always keep them guessing. That adds more of a texture that you're like, I don't know where we're going to go next. I hear so much of the responsibility that you're holding. It's not just the sort of narcissism of, I like to make a work, I'm going to make a work. But, you're like, oh, this is almost like a social contract with your audience, with your collaborators. Amid all of that responsibility and deadlines, what do you do if you just hit a dead end, right? Like the motivation. Creatively, the motivation's not happening, but you've got, 8 dancers in the room that are looking to you for what's next.
And if there's a moment that we created in the studio, and I don't know that I'm so into it, I think, well, maybe I just have to look more closely at it and pull it apart even more. So that is one thing, as opposed to running away from it. It's like rummaging through the junk drawer. Maybe there's something else that... And likewise, a former rehearsal director once said, just go back to the mission of the work. What is it that we're trying to do? Because I can easily get derailed and go to the opposite extreme. Just go to something that is so perversely different from what it is that I'm working on to see, well, maybe there's an answer in the opposing idea. Just to open a different door and see if there can be a tie-in.
Mm-hmm. What has continued to be a part of our conversation is this different ways of pushing curiosity, not just for curiosity's sake, but just kind of going like, well, what else?
What else?
Where, what else can I go inside of that? As opposed to, well, that's not working and scrubbing it all and starting over.
Yeah.
I am curious in the scope of your process, when and how do you name a piece?
I prefer to find titles that can be several things at once. And I know maybe to my own disservice, sometimes people won't know why I've chosen it, but there's also a door for somebody to figure something out and adopt it on their own. This new work for the longest time was called Cosm, and I hated that title. I just came up because cosmopolitan or like microcosm, let's just do that and see. But then even the collaborators are like, George, what is that? I don't know. So I did a little bit more digging into something that might align thematically. And hence the new title is Between Dog and Wolf. And so it's a French idiom, so people don't necessarily have to know what that means. They can conjure up their own sort of situation. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I'll land on a title and think, I just want to work from how it feels or how it looks on paper. Maybe that's really woo-woo to say, but...
It's not woo-woo at all. I really appreciate you describing it as a door, as a way in. Yeah. And not everyone walks through the door, right? Some people explore all the edges of the door. Yeah, some people are on the outside of it. Yeah.
I've heard ACDA adjudicators, American College Chances, who will look at a title and then define it before they give feedback on a piece. But I guess that's a way to navigate it.
There's so much agency for our audience and viewers, and the title is just one piece of information.
It is, yeah.
I think it's a harder lift, but I'm sure that I have seen a show where the artist was like, I will tell you the title afterwards.
Okay, yeah. And that makes some people angry and other people love it.
Right.
Some don't want to know a thing.
Yeah, I know definitely when I lived in New York, I wouldn't read the program until I was on my way home after a show. It was kind of a ritual.
Yeah.
That's very hard to do when you have to drive home, though.
Oh, yeah, it's so true.
I have so many programs in my car.
That
never got read.
Yeah. It reminds me when I was in Israel and I took my sabbatical there. I went to performances, but don't speak Hebrew, don't read the language. So it was this really wonderful mystery that I was inside of. And it was only me, only these dancers, sometimes speaking Hebrew, sometimes not. And I just had full creative license to absorb however I want. And it was really cool. I didn't feel anxious. Like, I didn't get it. What were they trying to say?
I mean, I think that speaks a lot for why you've chosen this path and found your way in dance. Not everyone is comfortable with the uncertainty.
That's so
and
true.
Some look for the I want to make sure I got it, and they're used to just solving for it. And
it's sad because, not sad, that could be a choice. And so I really do love is it this? I mean, people go nuts for that movie Inception or the thing. They don't know if the thing topples over or not. And it could be frustrating, but they still talk about it as opposed to tidying it up and putting it away in a package.
Yeah. We like those kinds of surprises.
We do, yeah.
It's been such a delight to get to go a little deeper with you. I have one last question. Yeah. My question is for you to either share a great piece of advice that has continued to serve you or offer your own piece of advice to anyone who's considering the navigation of a creative career.
My first dance teacher, Christine Velardo, when I was choreographing, I'd get so frantic about getting something out there. And she's like, George, a good idea will keep, and it's probably a seed. And as you and I were talking about yesterday, it's something that there's an eagerness to have things right away. And now that I'm 7 years old, I just realized I'm so grateful for that bit of advice, the notion of I didn't even know a seed was planted, but the fruit of it is occurring now. And the gift of patience, which that instilled, something will keep if it's meant to blossom. A good idea will keep.
Inside the Dancers Studio Conversation Series is produced by NCCAkron and supported in part by the University of Akron, the University of Akron Foundation, the Mary Schiller Myers Lecture Series in the Arts, and Audio-Technica, a global audio manufacturer with U.S. headquarters in Northeast Ohio. Our podcast program is produced by Lisa Niedermeyer of Handmade Future Studio. Rahsaan Cruz is our audio engineer, with transcription by Arushi Singh, theme music by Flaco Torres, and cover art by Micah Kraus. Special thanks to Laura Alicott, Sarah Durham, Christy Welter, Nikisha Moore-Dunson, and Dante Fields. To learn more about NCCAkron, please visit us online at nccakron.org and follow us on Instagram or Facebook at NCCAkron. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we encourage you to subscribe on your favorite podcast streaming platform by searching for Inside the Dancers Studio. Thanks for listening, and stay curious.